What's going on, guys? It is 8 o'clock in Minnesota where I live, and we're still drinking coffee. That's because it's stream number 3 for the day. So, guys, the reason we're going all in today is we are very, very close to Twitch partner. Very close. So, this is actually one of my favorite streams of the entire week, usually going through the past week's NFL lineup and then also looking at just the $1,500 tournament in general, breaking down some ownership stuff. This hasn't been a very fun show to do the last couple of weeks. Had some near misses at the cash line for sure. Another week, just full disclosure before we jump in, team was plenty good enough for double ups, even triple ups, but wasn't good enough to cash the 1,500. Very close again, which is pretty frustrating, but we'll get there. So after we get through the normal routine for Tuesday night, gonna hang around for a little bit longer than usual. Try and answer some of your guys' questions. Doesn't have to be about NFL. We had a couple other really great streams today. We actually did the first take cast live on Twitch with Davis Maddock, of course. If you guys haven't checked out his podcast, definitely subscribe to that on iTunes, give it a rating, but check out the stream as well. It was kind of fun to actually do that live and get a feel for what recording a podcast would be like while streaming at the same time. Not as much chat interaction, but still a lot of fun. Like Davis is I was talking about it in the Discord earlier. Davis is like a really underrated entrepreneur. So he's got a lot of really cool stuff going on. So yeah, as far as news and notes before we get into things, we will go through the resub contest. That's something that I will be running every month. This week we will be back to the normal subscriber contest in NFL, but we'll go over the winner for the resub contest a little bit as well. And then per usual, guys, like one of the one things that I always kind of want to lead you guys towards is the Discord community. That's like literally like every single day I wake up and it's just like, all right, this is still growing. Like people are getting a little bit more and more comfortable talking to each other, working through slates. We got people grinding NBA. We got people grinding NHL. It's been really cool to see. And thanks for everyone that's been around and that is back for the third stream of the day. See if I even have a voice to keep this going tomorrow. But hey, at this point, it's all about trying to hit Twitch partner, right? So I think that's pretty much it, guys. Let's jump over to the Roto Tracker, and I'll show you guys the clear graph that is going down. All right, so this is Roto Tracker. If you guys haven't seen any of my other streams, if you haven't seen the Bankroll Challenge stream, I have been using Roto Tracker to track that. It's actually one of my favorite things to look at every week, just all the different filters available. You can pretty much filter out anything for any date, any contest type. Doing this a lot for the Bankroll Challenge. We go over kind of how to use these filters a little bit more detail there. But for the most part, just for this one in particular, this is only it was a 1060 buy-in for, I think, the first 5 weeks of the season. And now it's a $1,500 buy-in on DraftKings. Still under 100 people, though. We'll go over the structure per usual in a minute. But yeah, started off really well in week 1 with a pretty nice hit in that tournament, followed by a couple down weeks, big spike, a neutral week, another big spike, and now this is what we like to call a downtrend. So honestly, I don't feel that bad about this. It's rough, obviously. Like, lose basically half of my profits from the season over the last 6 weeks gradually. But there's been a couple weeks in here where this doesn't really tell the entire story of my NFL week, just because I think of these 6 weeks, 3 of them I've still cashed double up. So one of the things that I do kind of like to mention on this show is that I think that a really great way to hedge your tournament exposure is to play at least a third of your action in double ups. And it's not to say you can't do it with head to heads or you can't do it with 50-50s, but if you play at least a third of your action and you bubble a tournament or you come close to cashing some of your higher dollar entries, you at least hopefully cash the 50-50. And you can kind of move on. Like NFL to me is about surviving, and it's about moving on, moving forward. So it's all about these spikes a couple times a year that can make your entire season. So we're going to keep chugging along. We do have 3 more weeks left of playing this contest before we get into one of the best times of the year as far as playoff DFS NFL goes. We'll definitely talk a lot more about that as we go. But yeah, obviously I wish this graph looked a little bit different, but it's the way she goes. That's NFL for you. So let's move over to DraftKings and kind of start to take a look at this contest. So per usual, only 72 people in this tournament. It is a $1,500 buy-in. Like I said, first place taking home $25K. So yeah, just to cash this, you need 17th place. And the worst part about this tournament, the thing that's changed the most, honestly, if it wasn't for this content, I probably would have moved on from this contest to something with a better structure. It's only a 1.5x multiplier, so your $1,500 buy-in, if you min cash, only turns to $2,500. That's pretty bad, honestly. And I think over the course of the season, that's something I typically try and avoid because it can bleed you out fairly quickly, because a min cash really doesn't help you a ton relative to a lot of the other games on DraftKings. So I talked a little bit more about that on the stream with Davis on his podcast. We talked a lot about some other games that are out there that you can play. Che Jello in the chat, which tourney would you pivot to? And there's a lot of actually really good ones. There's a couple that I don't know the exact names of them, but I would always try, for me at least, if you're doing the same kind of single entry tournament approach that I am, I still prioritize stuff that are under 100 people. I think that that's the best way to go about some of these tournaments. Basically, if we have anyone new here today, my main kind of goal is to do one of two things or both: have a unique lineup construction or have a slightly different correlation or pivot. So this week I actually did both of those things, which we'll get into. But yeah, we'll talk about that in a bit. Jojo said, love the take cast earlier. Good stuff. Thanks, Jojo. Yeah, we might have to do that again with Davis. That was a lot of fun. Forgot to mention, actually, the real Josh with a 2-month resubscribe tier 1 subscription. Appreciate you being back with us, man. Yeah, Josh has been in the Discord a ton, so great getting to know him. And Pat Bain with the 1,500 bits. Thanks, man. Kind of missed those earlier, but appreciate it, guys. All right, we should probably do this. Let's go ahead and get this over with. Let's talk about my team in this tournament. So we're going to scroll down. 17 cashes. And there I am, 26. So the difference in the cash line, honestly, was a lot bigger this week than it has been in a couple of weeks on this downtrend. So about 10 points difference. So what I opted to do, and I think this is a pretty big theme in NFL right now, is a week like last week where we have all the value in the world at running back. Honestly, the kind of higher stakes, sharp people, just in general, people that I respect that I talk to on Sunday mornings, like a lot of people thought the optimal lineup construction was to play both of those cheap running backs. And to be completely honest, I totally disagree. That's almost what made me want to go the complete other direction even more. So as you can see, I went with Saquon, McCaffrey, and Ezekiel Elliott. So to do something like that, you obviously have to make massive sacrifices. But to me, in today's NFL, this is something that is still vastly underpriced in NFL DFS. Beldum86 says, why no Deshaun? We'll get to that, my friend. So with these running backs, it's still like, I feel like I mention it every stream, but every week we have these cheap value options that people think are solid. And to be honest, like, it allowed you to get up to Keenan Allen. It allowed you to get up to DeAndre Hopkins. And I think that's bad with these guys on the table for similar price tags. Like Saquon Barkley, 8,900. Christian McCaffrey, I get it. He's quite a bit more, but even Zeke, like, it's really not that much different to get up to these elite usage running backs that are also being used almost at the same target share of some of these elite wide receivers, but they also have a massive red zone role. I don't really understand it. I would rather spend the majority of my cap. Maybe this is a little dramatic. I would rather spend the majority of my cap at running back for these guys that I think are the safest plays on the entire board, especially in a contest where I only have to beat 72 people. I think it's too cute to get moved down to these guys. Like, sure, point per dollar makes a ton of sense to play a guy like Samuel, and maybe he even ran a little bit bad. But at 3,800, it's great. Yeah, I mean, it allows you – the main argument is it's a safer way to punt than punting with one of these cheap wide receivers, as you can see, like that I went with. But I would argue that that's the entire reason that you go the other direction. Like, you're giving away a slot for the safest position that there is. So for me, the rest of the season, most of the season, I honestly think that if this is the common theme in the industry, like, you're always got to be looking for how can you kind of leverage the field. I think that this is a way to go. I mean, and this is a very niche, very specific contest that I play. So I guess I might be a little bit biased relative to the ownership, but if this gives me a unique roster construction, I'm willing to do it every single week. So yeah, to your point, Beldum 86, Deshaun was certainly in my lineup at one point in the morning. So the first thing that I do is I build what I think is optimal. And for me, that was something similar to this. I made a couple Aaron Jones lineups that faded McCaffrey. I played around with some of the cheaper running backs, just playing one of them. But the unique lineup construction for me was to play all three. So I checked that box, which allowed me to still play some of these plays that I thought were really solid plays. I talked about Deshaun Watson on the Sunday morning stream with CSU Ram. Like, loved Deshaun Watson. Just didn't really work out for him, but he did throw the ball a ton. And that's what we were projecting, right? So the big knock against Deshaun Watson is that he hasn't been throwing a ton. This offense has been running a lot. So last week, his attempts went to 31 pass attempts. So we talked about on the stream, like, if that's on the way up, like, I want access to this game. It was going to be a high-paced game, really good game environment. So 38 pass attempts, super happy with the process that led me to Deshaun Watson, especially the rushing equity. That's another thing. So the first thing I'm prioritizing from here on out, obviously, is the elite usage running backs. The second thing is these players that have dual ways to score points. So Deshaun Watson, obviously, he uses his legs a ton. He's cheap enough to where I still preferred him over some of the options in this range. Obviously, Aaron Rodgers was a great play. I'm sure we'll see a ton of him as well. There's a ton of guys that are around him. Andrew Luck, obviously, was the play in this range. But same kind of thing. Like, this game environment that I really liked at the line of scrimmage was a little bit better for the Luck side of things, but Luck on the road, Deshaun Watson with a little bit more rush equity. That's what I liked. So DeAndre Carter, $3,200. My 2v2 was to be playing the Packers D, who I loved, with Deshaun Watson, added correlation with DeAndre Carter. Carter was the play for me because Kiki was ruled out, obviously, late. So anytime there's late news, you know you're going to get super low ownership on some of these guys that might take his role. So 1.4%, obviously, super low ownership. Only saw one target. But the game before, he saw 6 targets, caught all of them. And I thought he was a relatively safe play. I thought Hamilton was the better play as far as overall expectation, for sure. So, but when I went to Hamilton, it also allowed me to get the salary to move up to the Chiefs, who I also liked in that game as a big favorite. So I preferred to kind of stay with the Packers, to be completely honest. So my big decision was, do I want to try and get some really low ownership? Like, I thought the Hamilton play was fine, but betting on those Denver wide receivers, I was getting a little bit of leverage off of Sutton, who I wasn't playing at that price because I preferred Godwin and Shepard. And obviously I couldn't fit all three. So I opted to, number one, do unique roster construction with the running backs. Talked about that. Number two, get some sort of low-owned correlation that's of value. And for me, that was Deshaun Watson, DeAndre Carter. Maybe it was thin. It was probably thin. But, I mean, if he sees 6 targets again like he did the week before, Kiki out, I think he's fine, especially for just kind of a leverage play off of the rest of the field. That was probably going to be heavy on Deshaun in that range. So that's kind of how I ended up to the DeAndre Carter play. Ian Thomas, for me, at tight end right now, the best way to go is just the barbell effect. I think you either got to pay all the way up for an elite talent like Kelsey, Kittle, or Ertz, or you got to find someone in this really cheap range. I'm not talking about the 3,900 Cameron Brate that scores touchdowns but doesn't do much else besides that. Like, I'm not really willing to mess around with, like, I'm not paying an extra 1K for that. I prefer to pay all the way down, at least target a decent situation that Ian Thomas had. I thought his target share was relatively solid in this game. Another game where I really liked the pace, liked the plays. Little mini stack with McCaffrey, which I liked. So I ended up going with two of those. I went with two offenses I thought had a pretty condensed target share. So McCaffrey and Thomas were two guys I liked. Obviously, Olsen out. Big bump for Ian Thomas, talented guy. Played him a bunch in the preseason. Ran pretty well, obviously. 9 catches, 77 yards. Didn't expect that from him by any means. But going with that condensed target share with McCaffrey and Ian Thomas, I thought was fine. Sterling Shepard and Saquon Barkley. I mean, with Odell out, I just thought that, I mean, every time Odell's out, Shepard just absolutely smashes. If that news comes out any earlier in the week, he's the highest owned wide receiver on the slate in this range. He probably outpaces Godwin even. So Godwin, loved him, like, still think that he's a really good play. It's tough, though, like, trying to decide between Godwin and Shepard. Thankfully, I didn't have to. Could have played Sutton, but I mentioned that I didn't love the Denver situation if they were going to be extremely chalky. So Sterling Shepard, though, just a condensed target share. I mean, I still think he was fine. Like, obviously getting 13, 14, whatever, 14 points from my wide receivers, all three of them combined, not ideal. But to be in it this late with that amount of points from my wide receivers just reinforces the fact that these running backs are where all the floor and ceiling comes from regardless. So say that it does work out and have obviously some great games from where my salary went to, but say DeAndre Carter breaks a big catch or something like that at low ownership, I pass all these teams with something like that. So honestly, this is one of the weeks, like, there's been a couple of weeks where I feel like I made a really big mistake. Like, I don't know if this was one of those weeks. I feel pretty good about the decisions I made relative to kind of taking a stand in roster construction. Could have played Hamilton. Should have played Hamilton. But if I played Hamilton, I was getting up to the Chiefs. It was only a 4-point difference. I don't cash this tournament anyway with a 4-point difference. So I'm totally fine with going with that kind of leverage play in this tournament specifically, because I was pretty comfortable with the Packers. Like, high-paced game, a lot of pass attempts on the Atlanta side. Green Bay pressures a ton. Atlanta's offensive line wasn't going to be able to fend them off, in my opinion. So that's kind of how I got there. Beldum 86. Love the paying up for running back roster construction. Was surprised how many people were on the Wilson Jr. Yeah, so that's, I mean, maybe I'm wrong. There was a lot of people I respect that played both those guys, Samuel and Wilson. I think that maybe if you really feel like, so it's your contest, right? Like, Manny and I talked about this last week on Hodge's stream, and if you're playing someone like the Millie Maker, I totally understand that you probably need a lot more upside at wide receiver than I do in this tournament. To be completely honest, I don't think it's that necessary to pay up for a guy like Keenan Allen, pay up for a guy like DeAndre Hopkins, unless the rest of your roster really makes that happen. And for me last week, it didn't. So Sutton's role wasn't going to change with Sanders out. That's why I didn't play Sutton. I'm with you, man. That's the same thing that I said on Sunday morning. I think Peter actually brought that up. So his role is completely different. Like, anytime we start to try and project what these offenses are going to do after an injury, after a trade, it seems like a situation that's a pretty easy fade to me in tournaments. So that's how I got there. Man, Jess, did you cash with this? No, I did not cash with this in the 1,500, cash double ups, cash even triple ups. But yeah, 17 people cashed this tournament, so didn't quite get there. But yeah, I mean, thankfully in week 6, I locked up being profitable in this tournament for the entire season. So hopefully we get at least one more cash in the last 3 weeks and make it a pretty good season in this tournament. I'd be pretty happy with that. Yeah, no worries, man. Just getting in, not a big deal. We got 37 people with us tonight. Really appreciate it, guys. Again, as we go through, we'll keep going through some of the lineups in this tournament. We'll go through the resub contest for sure. And then definitely just throw any questions you have out. Throw some names out if you want me to go over any specific teams. We're going to hang out for a little bit, guys. We're very, very close to hitting that mark we've been going for with Twitch partners. So even after we get done with NFL, I'm going to kind of hang out, answer some questions. Doesn't have to be anything crazy, just super low key, and appreciate you guys. All right, so let's actually move over to the resub contest quickly. So Ordination, Jordan, we all know Jordan. He's the mastermind behind the Discord. He's the reason I'm not a complete mess, yada, 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 yada. So it's only fitting that Jordan was to take down the resub contest. So he's basically getting paid for a lot of the work that he's probably already done and not gotten paid for. So I was happy for him. If you guys missed this contest, it was for resubs only, just because we've had so many gifted subs. Wanted to kind of give back to you guys a little bit. So the prize pool was a free roll in DraftKings, of course, but ended up shooting over $100 of my own money to Jordan. And then the next two guys got 25 as well. And then basically both of those guys got one coaching session for second and third, and then Jordan's going to get two. I think he's going to use it on some NHL, which I'm super pumped about. KP2150 with the follow. Thanks for being with us, KP. So yeah, Jordan took this thing down. Pretty similar roster construction to what I was talking about, honestly. What I really like what he did though, so yeah, he paid down for these wide receivers. Super sharp in my opinion. One with the different one, completely different ones than I did. But did get a little bit of correlation with Josh Allen and Zay Jones. Man, Jordan's listening to the streams, that's for sure. What I love about this team though, obviously he pays down for defense, totally fine, 2K, whatever. There's going to be a decent amount of passing in this game, hopefully a high pace. He gets up to Gronk, so I actually like that, just because I probably ran a little bit hot with my Jordan Thomas play, but Gronk has never been this cheap. If we need a touchdown, like, he had one of the higher kind of expectations relative to price at the position for sure. So I really like that. Got him at 6% in this tournament. By the way, so $100 up top, only had 16 people in this, guys. So the next one, just kind of keep that in mind. Like, you could pay for your sub for 2 years. You take this thing down. Hopefully this thing grows a little bit, but yeah, only got 16 people in this. So anyone that got in it, definitely a pretty awesome free roll for you guys. But yeah, really liked Jordan's team here. I thought it was really sharp. 181.44. That was a very, very, very good score last week. Obviously, Josh Allen, the rushing equity with a guy that cheap. And then Zay Jones. Really liked it, man. Then he jammed in all the running backs, which we've talked about a lot. So Ryan Hodge, second place, Roto Hobo. Pretty similar, honestly, for a couple of these plays that I was on, but totally different roster construction. So this was one of his league's teams for sure. So he got up to Hopkins, Julio, and Amari Cooper in the flex. I'm not sure if this was a late swap. I honestly don't think it was. Way too contrarian for a 16 man. Yeah, we'll have to look at your team, Steve. Yeah, so Hodge went with David Johnson, Aaron Jones. If you weren't going to pay all the way up, these guys kind of fit the bill, honestly, for guys that I was at least considering based on their usage and price and their upside. So didn't quite work out from those guys, but Hopkins, Julio, obviously, Julio goes absolutely nuts with Amari. I think he might have been the only one with Amari in this contest, so that obviously was huge for him. Did play the Packers D. Matt Lacoste, who I thought was fine, coming back off of a goose egg, super cheap again. If you were off the Denver wide receivers, made sense to go back to Lacoste, in my opinion. And Chester Rogers, this is one that Hodge was talking about on his stream on Sunday morning. I ended up going the Houston route with Carter, which obviously didn't work out so hot for me. But Chester Rogers, I think at that price was really sharp in this game as well at 3K. Just a game we loved for a lot of passing, a lot of points. Think that was a really strong play. Got a little bit of extra correlation as well, bringing it back with his Watson Hopkins team. So really like that for sure. No Rules 9. How can we play in this? Yeah, so if you're gifted a sub during the month, and or you're using your Prime subscription. So I don't think I've even mentioned it today, but if you do have an Amazon Prime account, you do have a Twitch Prime subscription for free. You just have to take advantage of it. So if you send me a screenshot in the Discord of your resub, or basically when your auto renew will happen, I'll shoot you the contest entry, and we'll kind of go from there. So we'll do this once a month, just a way for me to kind of give back, give you guys a little bit of incentive to remember to resub, basically. So yeah, that's how you get in. If you didn't get in this one, definitely get in the one for January. So we'll keep doing this. So Jay Fishman, 44. The NHL streets is where we most likely see him in the Discord, but really solid team here. So he did go with Rogers, who was very chalky in our tournament. You guys are too sharp. So 2 passing touchdowns, obviously, but love the rushing equity that he gave. That was probably higher than I had his expectation originally, which was nice. So he went with Rogers to Jimmy Graham, which was super unique. Only one with that stack in our contest for sure. And then Saquon, he did pay down for Jalen Samuels, but he did get in Zeke on the other side of that. So I still think that this roster construction was reasonable for sure. It allowed him to get up to Julio, basically. That was the biggest difference in this team for sure. Julio, 2 touchdowns, 100 yards, pretty big for that for sure. So nice team from Jay Fishman. You guys saw my team was good enough for 5th in our contest. Not good enough to cash the 1,500. So let's move back over to the 1,500 now. All right, so let's start at the top. Let's move all the way to the top of this tournament. So Giant Squid took it down. Congrats on the 25K. He did go with the chalky roster construction: Deshaun Watson, Jalen Samuels, Jeff Wilson. So he paid all the way up for Travis Kelce, who was just piled on at the high stakes. So 38.9%. Obviously thought he was a really good play against Baltimore, who, if they had one weakness, it is probably at the tight end position. Obviously Travis Kelce, an elite talent, could have even had a bigger game in this one for sure. So I think that paying up for Kelce was totally fine. This past week, he did play Saquon as his one high-price running back. Obviously, I loved Saquon quite a bit, especially after OBJ was rolled out. I think I preferred Zeke just because of the prop that he had on Sunday morning was just massive. But he did correlate Barkley with Giants D, which I thought made a good amount of sense. I wasn't so much on Giants D because they don't pressure very much. But one of the guys that I talked to on Sunday morning, Sean Newsham, you guys will see him in the chat a decent amount, I'm sure. He basically hit the nail on the head. If the Giants can get way ahead, they're the best play on the board against Sanchez. So obviously that came to fruition. Didn't expect the Giants to go up 40 to whatever it was, rest all their starters. That was kind of brutal for my team as well, obviously with Saquon and with Shepard. So Shepard's expectation as far as his target share, I think, would have just been massive in that game. So kind of ran bad with that. But yeah, Saquon to Giants D. Giants D is one that you had to come close to having in tournaments for sure. No Rules 9 with the Prime subscription. Welcome, man. Yeah, just next time we do the resub contest, just make sure you get in that one, man. Appreciate you being with us. So Amari Cooper, obviously you needed him to take anything huge down this week. So he did get up to DeAndre Hopkins with Deshaun Watson. So paying down at these running back slots allowed him to get to DeAndre Hopkins, allowed him to get to Kelce. So I think that if you were going to pay down, definitely makes some sense. But again, guys, like, I get it. They're 3,700, 3,800, but like, ceiling on these guys to give up a roster spot is not something that I'm super interested in. If he doesn't get this massive game from Amari Cooper, he's nowhere near the top of this tournament. So I think that's pretty run good, to be honest. Primetime in the second place, totally different lineup. Again, guys, if you see a name you want me to go over, just throw it in the chat. I'll make sure that I get that to that one next. So Matt Ryan did go to Julio Jones, which I liked, actually. So he didn't end up bringing it back with anyone on the Packers, which is interesting. But obviously a decent correlation there, pretty low owned stack. Pretty chalky at wide receiver outside of that with Keenan Allen, Deshaun Hamilton. Well, Deshaun Hamilton actually was only 11% in this. I think that's interesting. I bet some people pivoted away from that in the later games if they were behind. I really liked him. I mean, if there was a role change for anyone, it was Deshaun Hamilton, not Sutton. Like, he was running the routes in the slot, a lot of the same usage as Sanders would have in theory. So, I mean, I thought the Deshaun Hamilton play was actually very solid. But yeah, so he opted to go with Alvin Kamara versus Saquon versus CMC. I honestly wasn't on Kamara, so his price is still kind of baked into what it was earlier in the season when he was seeing a lot more usage, right? He's a timeshare back. In this game, I just don't really think that he was worth the salary. Obviously, he can go off for a massive game at any time for sure. But I think with those other options we had on the board, wasn't really on Kamara. I was actually surprised to see him at 23.6%. That was one of the ones that definitely stood out to me from an ownership perspective. I did play Jeff Wilson in his flex, so that allowed him to get to these wide receivers, obviously. So Keenan Allen, like, thought he was a really good play for sure. I mean, against the Cincy defense, like, without Melvin Gordon, like, there's a chance that he was just going to be leaned on heavily. And we did see that a decent amount. So he was super chalky, but again, 7,400, when you can try and get up to some of these other running backs, like, the expectation is nowhere near any of those guys, in my opinion. So I wasn't going anywhere near Keenan Allen on my main team, just never really got there with my lineup construction, but definitely understand the play for sure. He did play Ian Thomas, allowed him to get to some of these other options in Giants D. So let's move down a little bit. Mr. Good Seats, all right. '24th place. So yeah, I was looking at his lineup for a good majority of the day. We were super close. So he went with a pretty decent sized Green Bay and Atlanta stack. So Matt Ryan to Julio Jones, Tevin Coleman, brought it back with Aaron Jones. Interesting. Actually really liked Aaron Jones. I had him on a bunch of teams on Sunday morning, but got a little bit scared off with the injuries that they had on the offensive line. And I always am kind of a little bit nervous with these Green Bay running backs because of how pass heavy they are in the red zone. But again, like, thought he was fine. Maybe a little bit overpriced for a main team, but still think that he was in play for sure. He did go with Cortland Sutton, which obviously didn't work out. So Sutton, Julio Jones, and Keenan Allen definitely worked out for him for sure. But it's kind of thin for me just to play some of the Tevin Coleman, Jalen Samuels. Like, clearly this is more of a tournament game stack type team. He's not going with the same approach that I am, and a couple of people besides him are. So talking about another guy that tends to just make one team basically for the entire slate, just plays everything, obviously, but Empire Maker. So this is what I'm talking about. Like, a lot of really sharp people that I respect did play Wilson, did play Samuels. So maybe I'm off base. Like, feel free, guys. Like, if you think I'm wrong, tell me in the chat. Let me know. But this isn't the roster construction that I thought was optimal. He went chalky with Keenan Allen, DeAndre Hopkins, Chris Godwin. That's about as chalky at wide receiver as you can get. All of them were really good plays. Steve says, can't wait for Amari to brick at 30% ownership this week. Yeah, man, I'm with you. It's tough. I understand the people that went there. Like, he's shown massive upside since he's been in Dallas for sure. Wasn't a play that I was probably going to make. So yeah, Empire Maker decided to get up to Kelsey, which, I mean, I think a lot of people really were locked into getting all the way up to Kelsey or playing Ebron, one of the two. Those guys were both awesome plays. He did play Aaron Jones, so he faded all of the really expensive running backs, which is super interesting, but gave himself access to potentially all the touchdowns with Rodgers and Jones together. So actually kind of, I mean, I always like that roster construction, the running back and quarterback together. It's something that I've done quite a bit in this tournament this year. And then Empire did play Giants, of course. But yeah, I mean, this is an optimal cash type team for sure. And he's had a lot of success doing it. Didn't quite make the cash line this week, but I do think he was fine. Let's check out Peter's team. Yo Crunch with the Prime subscription. Welcome, man. Appreciate you. Who do you want to see, Yo Crunch? We'll give you the next choice here. T Gribbs, I was with you. Thought the opportunity cost us too much not to play two elite backs. Yeah, I think, I don't know, man. I think that playing at least two is what you had to do. I wasn't trying to play both these cheap running backs, but I was definitely on an island. Problem with that is it put you on Godwin, Sutton. Yeah, correct. Like, it was a week where these cheap wide receivers didn't get there. So obviously what I did doesn't look great in theory, but at probably the fourth quarter of the morning games was winning everything, literally everything. So it's hard to fully regret exactly what I did. So Steve wants to see Osimo. So let's see Osimo. Lamar Jackson. I actually very much considered Lamar Jackson in this game against KC. Game that we thought was going to see a ton of plays, really high pace. KC actually does give up a decent amount of rushing to quarterbacks. As soon as Flacco was ruled out completely, so there was no chance that Lamar was going to lose any snaps, thought he was really solid. So $200 in savings actually did a lot for my lineup. So I had some Lamar teams with a very similar core to what I had with different wide receivers. Didn't end up pulling the trigger on it, but if he was 2%, I do like that. Obviously, he played him naked, did play Saquon, so that was his running back of choice, and then rolled it back with the two cheap guys, Godwin, Allen. The difference in this lineup, obviously, is T.Y. Hilton. So did play T.Y. Hilton naked without luck, but T.Y., I mean, just smashes Houston. So 6,300, that was kind of outside of the range for me at wide receiver, but totally understood the play. Like, normally Osimo has super contrarian teams. This is not one of those teams. So that's actually kind of interesting. This is probably the chalkiest team I've seen him play in this all year. If Godwin Sutton do anything, it's a print week. Yeah, if Godwin Sutton do anything, it was all over for sure. Anyone that played the running backs won everything. Go look at last place. All right, let's go look at last place. Guys, I've almost finished last place in this, so let's not laugh too hard. All right. Last place, Drew Brees at 9.7%. Aaron Jones, Jalen Samuels, Gio Bernard at 1.4%. That's pretty interesting. Gio Bernard actually had a prop that was reversed, so they messed it up on Bovada on Sunday morning, and basically I think they put his rushing yardage as his receiving yardage. If someone correct me if I'm wrong in the chat that heard about that in Discord. I can't remember who found it for us. Steve, maybe it was you. But that didn't even end up running, which was kind of brutal. But yeah, definitely wasn't in my thought process for this tournament. Doesn't see really enough touches for me. Yeah, so Kenny Golladay at 1.4% against Patrick Peterson. Again, not something I'm really willing to do. Like these wide receivers, right? Like there's certain guys that totally elevate in an increased role that don't really need so Boyd comes to, for example, for Cincinnati. Like he's always better almost when AJ Green is in the lineup because he just draws so much more attention. Like Kenny Golladay, I feel like needs someone like that to like draw attention away from him a little bit. So Patrick Peterson, I mean, we don't get too worked up about wide receiver cornerback stuff around here. But yeah, I mean, Galladay's volume was very strong. But again, at 6,400, I was probably more likely to play Luck just because I was so high on that Houston game. And this was by far the slowest pace game of the week. Didn't expect there to be a lot of points, which definitely came to fruition. So Zach Ertz at 6.9%, like really solid pivot off of Kelsey if you kind of wanted to get off of that game. Yeah, I mean, I don't think that this lineup's terrible, to be honest. Like Michael Thomas was not something I was on, but I mean, unique correlation, I guess, getting them under 10% is interesting at the very least. I wonder how much of this was actual late swap. Probably not a ton of it. But yeah. Yo Crunch just jumped in, randomly found your stream the other day, had Dax, Zeke, Cooper, added Samuels. Pretty nice day. Yeah, I would say so, man. Knew I should have faded Kamara, though. Yeah, so what tournament did you play that in? I'll check out your lineup. We can check it out in the contest dashboard. Did you play the Millie Maker? Did you play anything like that? We'll check out your team. S. Kelly 77 says Gio was probably a late pivot. Yeah, you're probably right. I buy that for sure. That's probably the thing that makes the most sense in his spot. Yeah, so the Gio prop, they had 3.5 yards and 11.5 receptions. Yeah, so they totally screwed that up. Yeah, how does that work with Bovada? Like if they place a line like that and you get your bet in, do they have like total eligibility to just take it off the table? Is that pretty much what happened? That's pretty absurd. Anyways, all right, let's check out Peter's team. Peter had a really good week in this tournament. So we were talking about kind of the running back debate. He ended up on the right side of things. Not surprising. Peter's a goat. So instead of going with Watson at higher ownership, he went with Andrew Luck to T.Y. Hilton. He mentioned how much he loved T.Y. on the Sunday morning stream. I should have listened to him, to be completely honest with you. He did bring it back with DeAndre Hopkins, which I really liked, but he also added Eric Ebron. So Peter's game stacking this. He's doing it as well as anyone in this tournament. So his one-off play was Samuels for value, which makes sense. Packers D mentioned. I mean, I love Packers D. They were on my main team, so love that. Keenan Allen as a one-off play. So I mean, he ended up playing the two cheap running backs with Aaron Jones, so faded all of the high-priced studs in order to get Keenan Allen, T.Y. Hilton, and DeAndre Hopkins. Like, if you were going for the wide receiver upside and didn't have Julio, didn't get a whole lot better than this combination unless you played Amari. But from a roster construction standpoint, really solid, for sure. So really good team from Pete. Doozy says he didn't even get an apology email from Bovada. Oh, so you played it in the listener league. Interesting. I was in the listener league. Let me see if I can find that. I'll bring you guys over to my my perfect nice little roto tracker graph while I'm trying to find that contest. It's in your agreement when you make an account that they can cancel if it's an egregious mistake. Yeah, that's kind of what I figured, man. All right, history, listener league. All right. So my team was good enough to cash the listener league, not to cash the 1500, but let's bring it back over there. Yo, Crunch, do you have... Oh, never mind. You sent it to me. Deep. There we go. 202. That's an unreal score, man. Interesting. So Dak, Zeke, like you said, Cooper. You did play Kamara, which, I mean, yeah, like if you would have went with one of the other running backs, I mean, you did get a decent. I mean, I think Kamara's fine, honestly, especially on a tournament team like this. But that really hurt your bottom line, obviously. Kelsey, I mean, mentioned a couple of times paying up for Kelsey. Thought that was very sharp if you didn't go all the way down. You did play Samuels, which, again, a lot of really sharp people did. But your roster construction still was very solid, in my opinion. So Zay Jones, one of the cheaper guys that I thought made a ton of sense from a volume perspective. Dante Pettis, you actually got a decent amount of leverage there off of people playing the Denver wide receivers and playing the San Francisco running back. So 2.9%. Congrats, man. That's pretty sharp. Packers D. Love Packers D. This is a good team, man. What led you to get on Dallas? Like, just condensed target share? Like, this Philly defense is just not that strong? Or I'm curious. J.S. Kelly. I cashed the listener league also. Let's look at your lineup. Am I spelling your name wrong, J.S. Kelly? Your DK name? Let me know your DK name. I'll try and find it. Maybe I'm screwing something up. Pettis is a great player. That's a smart play. Yeah, Bedlam. Awesome pivot. I like the leverage that he got from it more than anything, to be honest. Like, that's a huge score. So 202. Let's see what it would have gotten in the 1500. I think that wins it by far. Yeah, by far. So obviously the big lesson for me is not that you should be playing the $1,500 tournament. The big difference is that this field size is 72 people. The listener league, obviously, is 10K. Hashtag make it bigger. So yeah, I mean, that's a pretty big lesson for me in general, is that you put up a score like 202, you better get paid, man. That's all I'm saying. Cool. Yeah, let's look at some of your guys' lineups. We don't need to always just look at the 1500. So K Gentes 2. Let's check out your lineup. Why can't I see some of these? This is weird. Maybe it's because, did you cash? You cashed as well. What the hell? Did you play, either of you guys, K Gentes or JS Kelly, did either of you guys play the Millie Maker? Because I can check on the contest dashboard as well. I'm in there if you want to run through them. V-Chair 23. Might have to export it. Yeah, that's a good idea. All right, you know what? Let's do the export. Let me see if I can bring this up for you guys. All right. All right, who's got NHL and NBA action out there while I'm bringing this up? Definitely gonna have to check and see how things are going at some point after we make it through NFL. Let's see here. All right, opening up CSV now. Philly D has been playing horrible. I'm from Dallas, so that helps. Isn't that awesome when you finally play your team and the bias just works in your favor like that? If you look at the analytics on Dallas offense since the bye, it's one of the best. What kind of numbers are you looking at as far as the analytics? I had a feeling Coop would have a blow-up game. Yeah, he's done it before there for sure. Dak, good rushing upside. Yeah, I'm with you on that. Like, I mean, yeah, you admit, right? I mean, 450 passing yards, run pretty hot. But, yeah, Zeke was a lock. I totally agree with you, man. Let's see. There we go. What is going on? I hate PCs. So I got this PC only for streaming, and anytime I have to do something else on it, it's just the biggest disaster ever. But I really want to show you guys teams. All right, we got that. There we go. Huh, it's not working. Let's see. Drag this over here. See if that'll work. Just bear with me here, guys. I do want to like look at your teams though. That's more fun than looking at the 1500 constantly. V-Chair 23 with this tier 1 sub. Thanks for being with us, man. Got a couple weeks of regular season left and then on to the postseason, which is going to be a lot of fun. Obviously, the fun is not going to end after NFL. There's going to be a lot of other stuff that we definitely get into after NFL ends for sure. All right, finally uploading. B Pinow 30 with the follow. Thanks, man. Welcome. All the new people that have subbed here on this stream. Really appreciate you guys. The first thing that I would tell you guys to do is join the Discord after this stream's over. Get involved. We're doing a lot of stuff in there, more honestly than the streaming. The YouTube as well. I would definitely appreciate if you guys checked out the YouTube and threw me a sub over there. All right, let's move back over to the spreadsheet since it took me a year to bring it up. And that's pretty ugly. Let's go to this one. That'll work. All right. What names am I looking at here? K Gentas. There we go. All right. So Aaron Rodgers, Saquon Barkley, Ezekiel Elliott. He did flex Jeff Wilson. Got in T.Y., Zay Jones, Deshaun Hamilton. I like it, man. So if you were going to play one of the cheap running backs, like I don't hate this construction as much as both the cheap running backs. Let me make that very clear. He did get to Kelsey and then played the Chiefs D. I guess you guys can't really see this, but so let's just go to this. I've been looking at this. So yeah, Deshaun Hamilton, loved him, Zay Jones, but he did get to T.Y. That was huge. So he played Aaron Rodgers naked. Was that because you thought he had enough rushing equity to kind of be fine on his own? Third down conversion from 22nd to 3rd since the bye. Time of possession. Yeah, see, Yo Crunch, these are great metrics, man. Like, this is not really stuff that I'm looking at for DFS, though. Like, third down conversion, not super relevant to me. Time of possession, you can make an argument that that's a detriment to them, honestly. Like, I want pace. I want plays. Red zone's still really bad. Like, that's the one that matters the most of that list, so I think. but you really just thought the offense would control the game. See, that's a decent argument. So game flow. Zeke obviously was a fantastic play. Cooper, ton of upside. Like, if he was going to get there, made sense that Dak would get there with a possible rush TD. Like, I'm with you with the thought process, and maybe not necessarily those metrics that led you there, but everything else sounds good to me, man. Play both Bridges and Jackson from Phoenix. NBA is killing me. I'm scared to open NBA if that's what's happening right now. J.S. Kelly. All right. Let's check out J.S. Kelly's team. So you had 2 teams in here. Which one do you want us to look at? The one that cashed, I'm guessing? Yeah. Okay, we'll look at the one that cashed. So Deshaun Watson, Aaron Jones, Nick Chubb. I love the Nick Chubb play, J.S. Kelly. I think that's really sharp. So he is one of those guys that I think comes pretty close to falling into that range with some of those expensive running backs, because he has been seeing a lot more usage in the passing game. Loved that game for plays. So he went Aaron Jones, Nick Chubb, Jalen Samuels. So none of the elite running backs allowed him to get to DeAndre Hopkins with Deshaun Watson. I mean, if I was going to stack up Watson with an elite, like a higher price wide receiver, like that was one of my favorite stacks. Like the DeAndre Hopkins play obviously didn't work out, but thought that it was fine. T.Y. Hilton on the other side of that. So Deshaun Watson to DeAndre Hopkins brings it back with T.Y. Hilton. Solid. You also had Eric Ebron. So I love this team. This is very similar to Pete's build. Packers defense, Dante Pettis. A lot more people play Dante Pettis than I thought. So maybe getting up to at least one of the super elite running backs were something that I would prioritize personally, but Aaron Jones and Nick Chubb, like really solid plays in the mid-range. So I like your team for sure. All right, let's move back over. Let's check this out here. All right. Let's scroll through here. Anyone else you want to look at? I'm going to look at A-Raven's team. Always look at A-Raven. Love the guy. Super sharp. I'm actually not shocked that he has the Pittsburgh stack, because the Pittsburgh stack I think was super interesting, but he didn't play any of the expensive wide receivers. So he didn't play AB, didn't play Juju. So he went with Vance, Samuels, and Ben Roethlisberger. That's like one of the cheaper ways for sure to get access to Pittsburgh in this game. So I actually think that that's super sharp. It allowed him to get to Zeke McCaffrey, which I obviously love. Amari Cooper, Cortland Sutton, Callaway. So like didn't get anything from 2 of his wide receivers. Didn't matter because he had Cooper obviously, but also got a ton of rushing equity with, I think this is a really sharp team, just because if everyone was kind of on, if Pittsburgh was a really good pivot, like obviously it's so hard to stack up AB and Juju and not have it affect your running backs. A really good way to do that, at least get some of the upside of this team, was to play Vance and Samuels. That's something I honestly never considered, but I kind of like this team. 10th place, so that was good enough for 3K. So double his buy-in for 10th place out of 72. That seems bad. You play any lineups on FanDuel? I didn't play FanDuel in anything big this past week. I've been kind of doing a lot more DraftKings this year in general. I prefer kind of the structure of the contest over here a little bit more. And FanDuel's like salary is always so much looser that I still think that it's much easier to make a team over there. And I would prefer it to be a lot harder, I guess. So I play some FanDuel depending on the week. Last week, it's not something that I did a ton of. Did you play? Check mine, please, in Listener League. A lot of you guys play the Listener League, huh? Let's check it out. Let's see. AJ Schwab. Let's look here. Bring you guys back over here since no one probably wants to look at that ugly spreadsheet. All right. So you went with the Ben Roethlisberger team. I dig that. What got you to Adrian Peterson? Did you think that there was a chance they were just going to lean heavy on the run with yeah, I mean, I think that's so your stack, obviously, you got Ben in, you got Juju in. Zeke. So this is clearly a tournament team. There's nothing wrong with that. Did play Matt Lacoste, who I mentioned before, like I thought was in a reasonable spot to bounce back for sure. Nothing had really changed a ton with that play. Chris Godwin, who I love, Deshaun Watson, who I loved. I think the biggest question mark for me was AP. How did you land on AP, man? Sanchez, got it. Steve says his 3 DK wide receivers combined for 8.9 points. Is that kind of weak, man? If the wide receivers would have gone off, it would have been literally the nuts for these guys that played the running backs for sure. Giants aren't good against the run. I buy that. But anytime that, I mean, they were a pretty massive dog in this game, weren't they? What was the line on this game? Let's look. Had some wear down near it. Yeah, I believe that. Yeah, where I think makes a little bit more sense feature. I think that's pretty sharp. Like, I mean, I obviously love Spencer Ware, but I think that pivot at that price range was one that I probably would have made it to just for recency bias alone. Since they traded Snacks Harrison, yeah, I get that for sure. And like AP, like it was a game script thing, right? Like, so if you thought that Washington was going to play well, it always kind of makes sense to go to AP just because they really want to control the ball. So I get it. Like, he's not necessarily one I would have landed on, but it was a pretty unique roster construction you went with for sure with Juju and Ben. You have to get kind of weird in some of these big tournaments, man. So I definitely don't think that it's horrible for a tournament team. Yeah, 3.5 point dogs. I guess that wasn't too bad. Yeah, I just don't have a ton of respect for this Washington team, I don't think. Let's move back over. All right. Went over Pete's team. Any other team you guys want me to go over as we scroll through? Just throw it in the chat. Let's see. Yeah, no problem, man. If anyone else wants me to look at their lineup, happy to do that too. Now would be a good play with the stud Josh Johnson on their center. I'm with you, man. I don't think Bales is in this tournament, V-Chair, but we could probably find Bales' exposures in the contest dashboard. Let's do that. I bet Bales played the Wildcat. Yep. So Bales had 13 entries in the Wildcat. You can look at his lineups right here. Let's look at his leverage first. So Bales' highest leverage play was Bruce Ellington. He had him at 23% of his team. So that was his cheap guy that we went with. I thought that made a lot of sense, honestly. Like, I played Bruce Ellington the week before, 10 targets at that price. Really solid. Again, not a ton there for Detroit right now. Didn't like the pace in this game, but I mean, still saw 4 targets. Didn't think it would. I mean, he's obviously one of those wide receivers that failed. Jarvis Landry. I love that Bales was on Jarvis Landry because I didn't have the stones to do it. I know a lot of sharp people thought that he was a really solid play. Did get in the end zone, obviously, but that's back-to-back games where he's shown a decent amount of chemistry with Baker. I think that's for real. So I like that for sure. So the field had him at 4.3%. And the Wildcat Bales had him at 23%. Aaron Jones, T.Y. Hilton. Let's see. I would imagine he had some pretty decent teams in this. Let's see here. This doesn't tell me exactly what his scores were, though, is the problem. All right, let's look at some of these teams that he had, though. So he had a Patrick Mahomes team with Travis Kelce, Samuels, Pittsburgh D. Pay up for Pittsburgh I thought was reasonable for sure. Keenan Allen, Godwin, Cortland Sutton, pretty chalky team there. Not sure what this 41% player is. Probably the other cheap running back, obviously. He did play a Spencer Ware team. That's interesting. Michael Thomas. Anyways, yeah, so Bale's leverage in general I think is super interesting. Cortland Sutton was his highest owned player, followed by Jalen Samuels. Interesting that he didn't play near as much Justin Jackson. Basically just matched the field on Justin Jackson. So clearly he thought Samuels was the guy to prioritize in that range. Yeah, the contest dashboard is awesome. So we looked at a decent amount of teams. Let's look at some of the stacks. I'm always kind of interested to see what the combinations are in the Millionaire Maker. So let's move over to the Stack Seeker. So one of the things that I think is really fun to do on this page is actually like see some of the chalk like combinations. So the first one that pops up, honestly, so Jalen Samuels and Jeffrey Wilson together. Obviously, the two highest owned players on the slate, these two running backs, 10% of teams in the Millionaire Maker played both. Interesting. Let's see how many people jammed in all three of the running backs. I bet the number is very low. So Saquon, Christian McCaffrey, and Zeke. 1% of teams jammed all three in. So guys, if you want to go with this approach, you're definitely already unique. Wait, Ovi got a hat trick tonight? Code, please don't be trolling. I have to check this right now. Code, I hope you're not trolling, man. That's going to be so tilting. Backstrom 4 assists. So someone in the Discord was all in on Washington, and he's probably winning everything. I love that. Like I said, I mean, I don't think Backstrom's ever a cash play, but if Ovi's going to go off, Backstrom's going to be a big part of it. Wow, so have those stacks, or you don't win anything, I guess, in tiers. I don't remember exactly what my exposures were, but we'll have to look at those after we're done with NFL, since we're going to hang out a little bit longer today. Let's see. All right, so what other combinations do you guys want me to look at in the Millionaire Maker? So let's look at Keenan Allen and Hopkins together, because I think that was by far the most like kind of popular wide receivers to pair together if you're paying all the way up. So almost 4% of teams had that's a pretty big number actually, for two higher price wide receivers. So I think that's interesting. Eichel has 10 shots. Wow, I love how we have all the NHL people in the chat. That's awesome. Giving me updates. Can you talk about your approach to this Saturday slate? These are kind of previews for the playoff slate. Yeah, Hodge said the exact same thing. So yeah, I haven't checked the contest yet. So the Saturday slate is just 2 games, right, Steve? So a little bit different than playoffs, but I mean the strategy is still the same. So depending on what teams it is, I really don't know who they are yet. But basically the biggest upside in playing these 2-game slates, these 4-game slates where there's actual time in between, is you're going to have time to think through your late swaps. So depending on if you're ahead or behind, you know so much more after that first game locks. If you're way behind, you have to give yourself a chance. So that's kind of how I would approach it. Maybe we'll have a special stream this week just to talk through that slate, because I do think it's interesting. Good idea, Steve. Greater than 1% had Bark, Zeke, McCaffrey, and Miller. Yeah. Is it showdown only? No, I think it's actually a 2-game slate. Correct me if I'm wrong, Steve. But yeah, we're definitely gonna talk about the playoff slates a lot on this channel. That's one of my favorite parts of the entire year. Zeke, McCaffrey, and Eckler. Yeah, I actually kind of like the Eckler play, to be completely honest. Let's look at that. A guy that's clearly, like, I mean, been great behind Gordon in the past. So I thought that now he has basically the keys. Only 5% owned. So yeah, not surprising that it's super low. So he was only 5% owned in the Millie. Yeah, less than 1%. Houston at New Jersey, Cleveland at Denver. That's kind of gross. Not a great game, so I think some fun plays. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting for sure. Showdown for each, but also 2-game slate. Yeah, I bet there's going to be showdown for the playoff weeks, I would assume, too, for every game, too. So DK is going to keep churning out that rake, that's for sure. One of the ones that I'm really curious about, actually, let's get these off here, is Zay Jones and Josh Allen. Pretty popular, actually, way to save salary. I think that this is really solid. Like, so Josh Allen, not someone that I've played this year. Full disclosure, like only playing a single entry. It's really tough to get there because their team total is always so low. But I love him as a fantasy player just because obviously the rushing upside, but he throws deep. His yards per attempt is very, very solid week in, week out. Zay Jones, cheap wide receiver. Obviously, he wasn't the Buffalo guy that got there, but starting with Josh Allen, Zay Jones, obviously Jordan did that in the resub contest. Thought it was a really good direction to go. JM like McKenzie, right? Yeah. Yeah, I think McKenzie was interesting for sure. Again, like didn't quite get there just because these Buffalo guys are kind of scary to me. So Gronk was only 13% on the milli. Let's look at some of these higher owned guys and see what the combinations were. So let's look at, so we mentioned that Samuels Wilson was a pretty high percentage, 10%. Let's see how many people played Cortland Sutton with that core as well. Wow, actually smaller than, or lower than I thought. So I mean, if you got these guys, you probably got in Keenan Allen. Yeah, so look at this. So 10% of teams play Jalen Samuels and Jeffrey Wilson. Almost all of those teams play Keenan Allen, or half of them. So that's still a pretty massive number. Let's see. DeAndre was much lower on, so I bet that one's pretty low. Yeah, so 3%, pretty similar. So those are the guys that people paid up for if they played Samuels and Wilson together. Kelsey, pretty similar. Kamara at 22%. That's so surprising to me in a timeshare. Luck was less than 4% owned. Yeah, let's check Luck TY. TY. Let's go search him. Jeez. He is way down there. There we go. 2% of teams had Luck and TY. Some familiar faces, though. Yodakao. I don't know how to say his name. Osimo. Chess is okay. There's some sharp people that played this stack, guys. Made a ton of sense. Especially with Watson being much higher owned. If you add Ebron, how far does it drop? Yeah, I bet it's much lower. Let's check, though. That's sharp. I mean, Ebron 14%. I bet it's... crap, I hate when that happens. So it goes from 2% to 1%. So, yeah, that's actually really sharp, man. So half the teams that played Luck and TY also played Ebron. That's a pretty interesting data point. All right, guys, I don't want to beat this to death too much. Been on stream for a little over an hour already. Was a good week overall. I feel good about my process. That kind of led me to where I ended up. Obviously, from a macro perspective, would prefer that this starts to go up a little bit. But it's still been a really profitable season in this tournament. Definitely think that just need to build on my decision making that I've been making, and eventually things will kind of turn. Still locked up profitability in this tournament, which is great. But yeah, that's pretty much where I'm at on the 1500, guys.